Alright guys, welcome to drawing class again. This is the second demo that I'm going to make for you guys while we're here at home. Hope you guys are doing okay. We're hanging in there, and I'm going to keep doing these demos for you, and I hope you enjoy them and learn. Today's demo is about chiaroscuro, and we're going to be doing a drawing of drapery using the effect of chiaroscuro, and actually we're going to be pushing that even further to the dramatic effect of chiaroscuro, which is tenebrism. So what are those terms? Chiaroscuro is the use of strong contrast between light and shadow created by light falling evenly or from a particular direction. I'm sure you've probably heard of this term before, but that's the thing you need to remember about that term, is that it is a dramatic, it's a contrast between light and dark. Light is falling across a thing, and there's a dark side and a light side, but there's a contrast involved between the light and shadow. And then tenebrism is the furthest extent of that chiaroscuro. It's where it's that chiaroscuro pushed to its farthest extent. So it's a dramatic light. It's profoundly pronounced chiaroscuro, dramatic illumination from a single direction. And the person that from art history that we attribute this to the most is Caravaggio, who painted during the 16th century. And you've probably seen some of these paintings before. I'll pull up a couple of them here. And he does a lot of paintings from biblical stories, which was pretty common back then. But he kind of liked to he liked to really draw out that dramatic part of these stories and find the most climactic part, and put this tenebrism effect onto it, that fully pushed chiaroscuro. So the first one I pull up here is the conversion of St. Paul, where St. Paul is being visited by the angel on the road to Damascus, and he's knocked off his donkey there. This probably happened during the day, or we don't know, but he puts this dramatic effect on it like that. The next one here is Judith beheading Holofernes, where the story behind that is basically that this woman, Judith, had manipulated Holofernes, and then in the end of the story is that she attacks him in his tent at night and beheads him. That's a whole really dramatic story. If you're interested, you can read into that. And then, of course, the last one here is David and Goliath, David with the head of Goliath, and that's that end of that climactic story where this little boy has defeated this huge giant. He takes his head and brings it to King Saul, and that's that moment of him presenting that. And he that's what Caravaggio does, is he takes all these moments and makes them really, they're dramatic stories as they are, but he makes them even more dramatic by putting them in that dramatic setting. So what we're doing today is we're not painting these really grotesque scenes, but what we are doing is taking that effect and drawing drapery with it. The assignment is draw a knotted fabric with a dramatic light source using the dramatic effect of chiaroscuro, that is tenebrism. Okay? All right, now I'm going to move the camera so you can kind of see the setup that I have over here. So I just wanted to show you my setup here in the corner that I've made. And so you can see how closely you can recreate this at home. What you're going to need is a piece of fabric again to put a knot into. So that's a sheet or a pillowcase or a t-shirt or something else. You have fabric somewhere in your house or your apartment. So here I have a pillowcase that I've knotted up like this. And I've push pinned it into the wall, and that's what you're going to do with that. You're going to attach it to the wall in some way if you can, so with push pins or tape, or problem solve your way through that. If you can't put it on the wall, worst case scenario, you can lay it on the ground in some interesting way. But the one thing you are going to need for this assignment, and that's your second step, and that is to set up a light source. So you're going to need a light source, and you're going to need to set it up in a dramatic way. So I've put it here, hence the whole purpose of what chiaroscuro is, right? And tenebrism. So what I've done is I have this clamp light that's attached down here to this table, and I've put it really close to this pillowcase here, and as close as I can get it, because that's really how I'm going to get that dramatic lighting effect. And that's what's going to make those shadows really dark, and the highlight's really bright, and that's what's going to create that effect. So the closer you can get the light, the better. And then as much light as you can block out would be great, but I don't want you to worry too much about that. If that's beyond your control, that's fine. But that's why I've kind of made a little room for this, where I put like black foam core all the way around. And that's just so that I can get that really darkest area to create that really dramatic light. Do whatever you can to recreate that, but again, if you can't, it's really no big deal. Just this is the bare minimum of what you need, is a knotted fabric with a light source really close to it. And the other thing I know you can't see, but I have cast shadows going on here, which I'm going to try and draw. And the reason why we're doing kind of a knotted fabric is because it creates that tension area, and not only does it create a more challenge for you, more of a challenge in drawing, because you are drawing for this for 2 days. We want it to be interesting enough for you to do that. But also I feel like it's kind of representative of how we're feeling right now in our, I don't know, in our own little worlds, is that we're, I don't know, at least that's how I feel. I got like a lot of tension, built up tension. I need to like go for a lot of runs or something, but it's just kind of really representative of an angst, right? So anyway, from a conceptual standpoint, from a logistical standpoint, that's kind of why we're doing this. And then for materials, what you're going to need is obviously your paper, but then also your charcoal and your erasers. So we have the vine, we have the charcoal pencils here, and we have our erasers. So I have a couple different erasers here. The kneaded for sure. I have a new kneaded one sitting there if I need it, and a couple white erasers that you can cut up in the event that you don't have something like this, like stick erasers. I know you guys don't have these. You might if you went ahead and you ordered them, but these are those mono zero erasers. But tough stuff, and then the mono zero ones, again, you don't necessarily need those. You can always cut this up with an X-Acto blade or with a knife or something like that. I use this sanding block. Some of you guys, I've seen some of you guys have those to clean my erasers with, my stick erasers. It cleans them really well. All right, and also to dull graphite pencils, but we're not using graphite right now. So, okay, so let's get started. Okay, so our third step is to tone our paper. So same as before, same as that first subtractive drawing that we did, except for with this one, I'm going to challenge you to tone the entire page, because hopefully we can make a really black background all the way around. So that is what I'm going to do. All right, now I still have my piece of paper towel from before, so I'm going to rub that in. And you'll notice that when you go in different directions, it really blends it in even more. If I just went in the one direction, it wouldn't get as blended. Okay, step number 4 is to gesture and cite the drawing, okay? So first thing first, always when you're drawing from life, it's just a light gesture. So here I go. So a lot of people have a big problem when trying to plan out like drapery, and I hear that a lot of time. So I think a lot of people just get tripped up on drapery and think that it's this really difficult thing, when in reality, if you just think of everything as just shapes, if you're working general to specific like you should be, it's really not that difficult. So if you notice while I was drawing, I just started out with a very light gesture, and only now am I starting to really break down all the folds. And so I'm just considering each shape, each different change of plane, and just giving myself enough information to start going in with that kneaded eraser in a second. That kneaded eraser, when you start to pull out those lights, that's really when you start to form the folds. So don't expect that you're going to make it look really correct at the planning out stage. That being said, you have to plan out a lot in order to know where you're going. So just watch me as I do this, and notice that I start out more general and then only later do I get more specific with these plans here. Notice too that I'm using a lot of straight lines, and only very rarely am I using curved lines. And the only curved lines I really did use was this kind of a thing and this kind of a thing. Mostly, even this curve is a lot of straight lines, and that's because I'm still dissecting that whole thing in my brain. I'm not trying to predetermine what that curve is before I just draw it. Okay, so as you can see, I spent a lot of time planning out where I'm going to put value, where I'm going to pull out lights, or where I'm going to lay down darks. Now, you can spend a lot more time than this on that, and I feel confident. You know you're ready to move on when you feel confident that you know where your value is going, that you know confidently where you're going to be pulling out lights and where you're going to be laying down darks, where you're going to be leaving the gray of the paper. And that brings me to probably the most difficult part of subtractive drawing, is knowing where to leave the gray of the paper. And you're constantly keeping in mind those 6 zones of value, right? Highlight, light, shadow, core shadow, reflected light, and cast shadow. Now, where the gray of the paper is left is where there is reflected light, and sometimes where shadow is starting, okay? So between light and cast shadow, there's oftentimes a lot of the gray of the paper left, where you're not putting tone or bringing up the light, because we want an even, we want the whole value scale present, right? So we're leaving the tone of the paper oftentimes in those 2 areas, reflected light and shadow, reflected light and shadow. Okay, so I'm ready to start addressing value. So that brings us to step number 6, is to start pulling out general lights of value with your eraser. All right, so how I do that, a lot like how I did it in the first subtractive drawing, but I'm constantly moving this around in my hand and reforming it to be what I need it to be. And as I'm about to pull out these lights, I'm constantly addressing how the light is moving across the form, because it's not just about, okay, I see light there, so that's where I pull it out. That's step 1 there. It's farther than that. It's how you pull it out. So it's just being intentional with everything that you're doing in the drawing. So just watch how I do this, and watch how I'm changing the direction that I'm pulling it away, how I'm forming this, because this is a drawing tool. You are drawing light. It's a very important part of the process. And when I go to do this, I'm going to start with the brightest area, because I know I'm likely not gonna pull out too much. So before I'm used to it, again, I'm going to start in the brightest area, and that's right here where my light source is. So now we are on to step 7. I've pulled out quite a bit of lights. I feel like I'm confident to move forward. Notice that I spent quite a bit of time here, because that's where my lightest area is. I'm going to now lay down initial darks, and then we'll move forward from there with the compressed charcoal and really bring out that dark contrast, where this whole thing's going to get really dark, and yeah, so we'll work from there. But step 7 here, lay down initial darks, and what I'm thinking about for that is the darkest areas inside of here, and I've already kind of planned out a lot of them while I was planning out the drawing, and the reason for that was because I needed some sort of a marker for myself of like, okay, this shadow shape is here, so I knew what shapes were going on around there. But I'm going to just address that again before moving on, and kind of, lay this in here, and a little bit more up here. And then I'm probably going to seamlessly move into step number 8, which is alternating between the two, laying down darks and bringing up lights. Now again, the hardest part of subtractive drawing is leaving the gray of the paper. So notice how I've tried to leave the gray of the paper as much as possible here, that to where when I'm moving to laying down my darks, I'm not just laying down my darks right next to where I just erased, because then you're just going to have a black and white drawing and it's not going to have that transition between light to dark, which is that chiaroscuro effect. One thing I forgot to tell you at the beginning of the video is that you will be needing your compressed charcoal, which is this stuff that I've seen a lot of you guys with. You probably don't have this box, but it's just charcoal sticks. Now, if you don't have that, it's fine, but let me show you how to use it if you do have it. Now, this is the blackest black in a drawing medium that you're ever gonna get. It's really, really, really dark. So we're going to be careful with it because it's really hard to take up. So that's why we're waiting till this point to use it, so we know where to put it, because you can't just kind of guess with it. It's kind of on there. So how I'm going to use this is, you noticed how I kind of made this shadow shape around this, and that was to make that pop off the page, which is why I put it on a black background, because I planned on doing that from the beginning. I'm really only going to use this there for right now, and I'm probably going to very selectively put it in the very darkest areas in here, because your charcoal pencils are the same thing. Well, they're basically the same thing, except for that this is going to be much darker, but I can achieve the same thing a lot safer with like an extra soft or a soft charcoal pencil. So I'm going to start to use these inside of the drawing, but I'm going to use this big thing to do the outside stuff. And I'm just going to have some fun with it and see where it goes, see how far I get with it, and see if I like it. I'm not really liking it right now. Okay, so what I just did was, and I'm gonna keep going with this, but I really didn't like the effect that this was having on top of this vine. I'm not sure if it's because of the thinness of the paper and the texture of this board behind here, why it's doing that, but it's kind of giving this grainy effect over here. But what I ended up doing was I went over top of it with my vine, and it kind of smoothed that out a lot more and kind of dulled it down, which I end up liking a lot more. So that takes a lot of vine though to do that. So you use this selectively if you want. Some of you guys like really dark stuff with your pieces, so you might end up liking that. Well, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of curious to see how I pull this one off. But you can see I created like a really dark halo around it. That was my plan, and I thought it was gonna look a lot better than it did, but well, now what I have is a lot of compress on the outside, and I need to bring that back into the drawing because it's just kind of like, this is just kind of like very different than everything around it. And I think that enough layering of the vine over top of that compressed and enough of the compressed charcoal with the pencils in the drawing are going to make that all blend together. And I do encourage you to do this if you can, because that's how we're going to get that really high contrast. Like you can see here, it's really black. And so that's how we're going to get that chiaroscuro effect. However, I can understand if what I just did scares the bejesus out of you. And if you don't even have compressed charcoal, then don't worry about it. But that is going to do that to your hands if you want to go wash your hands. But I'm tough, so I'm going to leave my hands dirty while I do the rest of it. That process that you learned about layering in different directions with your pencils, that's what you're going to use with this. And you're going to start in the direction of the shape of that core shadow, how it's going around something, or if it's in a deep area, you know, how is it coming out of that area? So again, it's about being intentional with the media, just like we were with our kneaded eraser, using that kneaded eraser in the form of that light. Same thing with the pencils. Every time you're using a medium on here, in any of your pieces, you're being more intentional with it than just, well, that's light, so it's going to be erased. No, it's about how you're erasing it out and how you're laying it down. So, I don't know. I'm just going to start. We'll see where it goes. Okay, so I think this is going to work. It's just going to take a lot of time. So I'm going to keep developing this. Okay, so ideally I would continue to develop this. I don't really like the background right now, so I would maybe work that a little bit better. So what I'm going to do right now is, because I really want you to see what this looks like really up close, I'm going to bring you and zoom you right in on this, and I'll work on that for a little bit. Okay, so as you could tell earlier, I was doing a lot of charcoal pencil all over the place, and that was because that was making it blend a lot better. I was remembering a lot of how to use charcoal pencil as I was going. A really, really good rule of thumb and a good practice is to outline the core shadows. I'm gonna alternate between extra soft and soft. Okay. And I'm going to use medium selectively for some lighter areas. I think you can kind of tell that I can keep working on this for a very long time. And the image that you're seeing here is not what I'm seeing. I'm looking at the actual object. So I'm taking a picture afterwards and putting it next to here so you can see that. But obviously my thing isn't exactly, you know, what it looks like, but that's what we're doing as artists, is that we're interpreting it on our own. So one thing I do want to point out though is, you can probably see it kind of in here better, is where I'm starting to outline around shapes with the charcoal pencil. That's a really good effect to do too with the charcoal pencil. It's kind of brings a lot more contrast and interest into the piece. And then really what we're going for with Chiaroscuro is that really dark, high contrast thing. So go over your steps again. Step 1 is to find the fabric, knot it up, and pin it to the wall. Put a high contrast light on it. Step number 2, put a dramatic light on there. Find a light source, put it right next to the object. Get that as high contrast as possible because it's going to make this a lot easier. Step 3 is to tone your paper, rub it around, get that ready. Step 4 is to plan out your drawing with that vine charcoal. Spend a lot of time doing that. The more time you do that, the better. I could have spent a ton more time on that too. This gets really complicated in the knot itself, so take your time with it. If it means that you walk up to it and look at it up close to help you out, that's good. Plan out your value. So as you're nearing the end of planning out this piece and moving that vine around, you can restart several times too in that point with just your vine on the page, and rub it back into the background and restart. But then you want to, once you're nearing the end of planning that out, sighting and making sure everything's all where it goes, you're going to plan out your value by lightly outlining where highlights are and where shadow shapes are. Sometimes, as you could see when I was planning it out, I just put a really deep shadow in there really quick so that I knew that's what was going on there, and I didn't get confused. One little thing about when you're sighting the object, sight like the area below and above the knot, and it's the overall width of the composition compared to its height, stuff like that. Compare the knot itself to the top or to the bottom above it. That will help you out. And then you start to actually address values in steps 6 and 7, where step 6 you're pulling out your lights with your kneaded eraser, or your other erasers. Again, being very intentional with the usage of that eraser. It's not just about, okay, well, I see light there, so I erase there. No, it's about how you're erasing it and actually painting the light. That's what you're doing. You're drawing light at that point with your kneaded eraser. More so in subtractive drawing than anything else, any other kind of drawing. And then you are laying down your darks. So you probably started to do that when you were planning out the piece, but you want to continue to do that. You saw when I was doing that part, I made this dark area around it so that this whole fabric piece could jump off the page. I would challenge you to do more than what I did. Just make this whole thing black, dark, I think would be really cool. Okay, and then you're alternating between the two in the piece itself, so you're just constantly going back and forth between dark and light. You could probably tell during the time lapses that I was all over the place. I did not focus on one little area ever. I was here, then I was there, then I was there, then I was there, then I was all over the place. Because I didn't want to focus on one area too much and lose track of where I was. Step 9, lay down your darks with compressed, and that's where I did this, and it kind of looked kind of weird for a little bit. I was kind of worried about it. And enough going over that with the charcoal pencils and with Vine will make that kind of blend in even better. I kind of tried to bring it in some areas, and I encourage you to do that too, because that's really going to make this look chiaroscuro, as having areas that fall off into the background. So that's what I did in here, where I'm really letting the background really seep in to the piece, and I could embellish that even more. Areas like in here where the background just kind of like seeps into it. That really is going to make that much more dramatic. Then details with charcoal pencils, and I'm going to be honest, that will take you a whole day. Like, you could spend a lot of time on that. You want to start out by addressing your core shadows, but as you could see, I was putting charcoal pencil everywhere. Use your medium soft and extra soft. The medium can be used in the lighter areas as well, not necessarily your highlights. Your highlights, you want to leave the white of the paper as best as you can. You're not going to get back to the white of the paper after you toned the paper, but you want to leave your highlights the brightest bright. So you're not going to put charcoal pencil on that. But almost everything else, you will, just because it makes this nice texture that kind of blends everything together and brings everything together. So you can use the medium even in those lighter shadow areas and those maybe darker light areas, and that will help bring things together. But you're using the same principle as we kind of grained into your brain for the graphite, and that is short strokes in different directions, but you're always going in the direction of the fold. So on the fold's going everywhere. It's going all over the place. So you're just constantly addressing that one little area that you're touching and which direction is that going in. And I wish I could spend a ton more time on this and really develop this even more, but it's something. So that is the full 10 steps for this. And don't feel like you have to like marry those steps and just go that way. You can go back and forth between stuff. Let me know if you have any questions, but yeah, I'm excited about this one. I think it'll be fun. So yeah, have fun and let me know if you have any questions. All right.